Well, if you're expecting that to be funny, it probably wasn't very funny, but very poignant, honestly, that, there was a lot of discussion throughout the course of that show, if you ever watched it, about whether Sheldon might have autism, maybe be on the spectrum, really on the high functioning end of it or something. But the writers always insisted, no, he doesn't have autism. He just has like significant difficulty interacting with the other humans. It's not autism. And so I'm going to have to believe that the writers did not ever diagnose him with autism, and that really he just had this really big difficulty in showing empathy for other people. He was lacking in emotional intelligence, whereas Penny has a ton of emotional intelligence. So if we want to build self-control, a lot of people say, well, we need to develop our emotional intelligence. If you're interested in the topic of emotional intelligence, we have a class called Emotions and Emotional Intelligence, so you can delve into that in more detail. I'm going to talk about it briefly here, the concept of emotional intelligence here. Whoops, I just started the video. Stop. So, how do we develop emotional intelligence? This little video, I'm going to have to probably bootleg it and put it into the YouTube playlist because it's on Vimeo. And so I might just link it in our classroom because it's not nice to bootleg stuff. But this video that's linked here is a video that is from the 1990s, and they interviewed Daniel Goleman, who is sort of the founder of the concept of not only emotional intelligence, he actually just sort of integrated what other researchers had done, but he talked about it as something that can be developed, that can be trained. And in the video that I am going to link for you, he introduces or shows a technique that you can use on children to give very clear-cut feedback about whether the behavior they're engaging in right now is good or bad behavior. Should they stop it right now, or should they continue what they're doing? And so that little video will help you to understand a little bit about strategies that adults can take to help children to develop their emotional intelligence. Now, our book recognizes that you might not be a child and that you might still want to benefit your own emotional intelligence. So in the book, there is, you'll notice a series of pages, like 6 pages of, it's probably 7 pages, of how to set up a plan for self-regulation. So let's hop over there and take a quick look at our page 89 is where it starts. And so in this little workbook kind of thing, you're going to try and target a particular behavior. For me, it's starting every sentence with the word so. Okay, so that's the behavior I want to change. Just full disclosure, I've been working on this since fall quarter, and it is currently spring quarter, and so I'm not making great headway. But define what behavior you want to change, and then think specifically about the benefits that could accrue if you were to change the behavior. What would it do for you, to you, on your behalf, to be able to change that behavior? And then what are your goals for the behavior change? And the important thing here is to set realistic and achievable goals that maybe you could break down into parts. Right now, my goal for my behavior change is to just get rid of the word so as my introduction in a sentence. The first thing, it's like every sentence I utter is so, comma, so I'm trying to stop doing that. Seems like a realistic goal. I'm not sure how achievable it's been so far, but maybe later maybe once I master that, maybe I'll say I also can't start any clauses within a sentence with the word so. Maybe I need to just stop saying so much. There are certain times where it makes sense and other times where I need to get rid of it. And so I'm going to start small and realistic. Don't start sentences with it. And then maybe I can expand after that. And so there are long-term goals, short-term goals that you can delineate. And then step 4 is to consider, are you ready for the change? I'm ready. I've been ready for a while, But there are different kinds of behaviors. There are other things, like, for example, embarking on a weight loss program or an exercise program. Those are things that you really need to think, am I ready to do this? Am I ready to do what it would take to commit to making the changes, right? There are, interpersonal things that you might be working on, and, are you ready to be making these changes? And if you're not ready, it's probably not the time to be doing it. So you can take this little quiz, Sienna said so, to figure out how ready you really are for it. And then identify anything that's going to help you towards your goals that are already there, any kinds of things that are making it more likely you'll achieve it, anything that's like maybe going to be a roadblock for you. It's really a great idea to think about those things and delineate them now so that you can kind of be, I am the queen of being surprised by things all the time. Oh, I didn't know that was going to happen, even though it was possibly foreseeable, given that I've been in circumstances like this before. Maybe I should have been ready. It could happen again, but maybe it's something that happens pretty rarely. So I'm always surprised. Listing things out makes it less likely that you will be taken by surprise. Let's see, that's hurdles, how to overcome them. And then step 6 is, what will be your best helper? So identify the one thing that's going to be maybe your go-to when confronted with a hurdle. What will be your sort of, I always like to call it the locked and loaded kind of thing, like you're Dirty Harry and you're fighting some kind of criminal. But you're locked and loaded. This is always my go-to. This is what I'm going to do. How can you alter your surroundings to support change? Maybe you need to do something about how you have your house set up, or your workstation set up, or your clothing organized, or whatever it is. So how can I alter my surroundings to support change? One thing I could do is, when I'm recording these lectures, maybe have an actual script. I think when I'm thinking on the fly, uttering the word so buys me some time while I'm thinking about the next thing I'm going to say. Maybe I should get a script, not just use an outline. Those kinds of thoughts. How could you organize your environment better? And so there are questions for you to consider. And here's a contract for behavior change. If you have ever there's another class, if you're kind of liking this idea, there's a class called Cognitive and Behavior Change, and you go through this exact same process and try and work on a behavior. And then what will be your reward if you achieve the goal? Now, we already know that the goal achievement is going to be somehow beneficial to you because you already listed that earlier. But maybe you want to have little rewards along the way to keep you going. Maybe you want to have a big reward to celebrate the big outcome, something like that. So it gives you ideas for what your rewards can be. Have a work plan, record your progress. The more you document things, the more you can see little changes that maybe you wouldn't have noticed if you had just not tracked where you started from. So that's a really important thing whenever you're changing any kind of behavior. All right, so record your progress as you go. Here's an idea of a tracking chart where you could make a chart like this and fill out what you're doing. And then for next time, start thinking ahead, because there will be something else that you're going to want to work on. So look, that's a lot of steps and a lot of things to think about. And you can imagine this is why a lot of times we don't bother to change very much. We just sort of stay in our rut because it's a lot of work to gain control over something that right now we're sort of letting go, right? So quantifying things, writing them down, and thinking about them. A lot of times the behaviors that we don't like about ourselves are the ones that we try not to think about. So by forcing ourselves to think about it and to line all these things up is step one in being able to regulate our own behaviors and gain that self-control that we say we want, but that maybe we're a little scared of getting started. So that's an idea. If you have a behavior, for me, it's always about things that I don't like to think about, like, dietary things or the frequency of exercise or those kinds of things. That's the sort of thing I'm the most likely to sort of go, I don't feel like thinking about it. Writing articles is another one. I read a really great book about how to be a productive writer, because I have I have published papers. I'm all like, once I do it, I'm good at it, but it's like that part of self-control where I say to myself, what this book recommends is every single day at the same time, you set aside, this is your writing time. And even if that time is spent making an outline, or that time is spent making cards with different notes from different articles that you've read lately, or just organizational things rather than true writing stuff, dedicating that time and saying, this is when I write, is what's important. And that's what the person was arguing basically, is regulating myself, gaining control over myself so that I will, engage in the behaviors that I want myself to do. So greater self-regulation is associated with, setting standards, becoming more self-aware. It takes a lot of practice, right? So the more a person practices self-regulation, the more self-regulation the person tends to display. Self-regulation and self-control, a lot of times because our parents told us, to display self-control, it feels like something external, but it's something that we're talking about that you would have from inside yourself. It's your own self setting your own goals and regulating yourself toward whatever kind of control you want to have for yourself. It doesn't have to be something that anybody else approves of. Misregulation, you tend to see a lot of avoidance of behaviors, thinking about things or doing things. You see people just avoiding it. That's what procrastination is about. That's an example of misregulation. We are afraid of what's going to happen, and so we avoid it. Misregulation is also associated with negative distractors. So not distractors that are, enjoyable or pleasurable or whatever, but just things that sort of take up our time or make us think about something else, or absorb. Oh, I almost said absorb time but that was the first thing I had in mind. But how often do you find yourself having wasted 30, 45, an hour just aimlessly scrolling through whatever social media type thing you like to do? That is the worst of the negative distractors, as far as it's engaging, it's kind of rewarding, might make you laugh, might make you think, might make you envious, might make you motivated. So but it's something that just sucks your time. And so it's an example of misregulation. Then there's underregulation, which is, where we maybe are letting out our emotions. Venting is an example of underregulation. There's nothing to be done about the thing that we want to vent about. It's not productive to vent. It kind of feels good. So we let it all out. And sometimes when we vent, we end up letting out things that are kind of negative. We have negative effects on the listener, or we have negative effects on some relationship as a result of having vented about something. So venting is an example of underregulation, and acting out is also punching a wall, tearing something up, those kinds of things. Those examples of acting out are underregulation times, where you just sort of like got swept up and you just have to do it. And so you do this behavior. We would call them like irresistible impulses, where it's like, I couldn't help it. I had to do it. So under-regulation is, the negative side. That's the downside. Misregulation and under-regulation are both negatives, and self-regulation are associated with positive outcomes. So this week's positivity exercise, besides hopefully maybe you'll look at the behavior change exercise, but that would probably go on for weeks. Honestly, if you start it now, you might be lucky if you've got it done by the end of the quarter. This is this week's positivity exercise. Here's a Quaker saying, I expect to pass through this world but once. Any good, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness that I can show to any fellow creature, let me do it now. Let me not defer or neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again. So it's a Quaker saying, and it is a good leap-off point for showing kindness. Back in the olden days of yore, I think it was the late 80s, maybe early 90s, a psychologist heard yet again on the news a story where the newscaster characterized it as a senseless act of violence, or a random act of violence. And he thought, why can't we have more random acts of kindness? And so you may have heard the phrase random acts of kindness. It was coined by a psychologist. Here are some ideas for just maybe kindnesses. They don't have to be random for them to be positive. So maybe you have an elderly neighbor who could use a ride somewhere, and you have the ability to give them a ride. Maybe you have a skill. Maybe you could help a child draw something, or help somebody who's not as good at tech as you are to use their device, or set something up, or help them set up their network in their house, or get their internet running, or something like that. Maybe send a care package to someone who's under stress. Maybe, your friend or loved one has been expressing a lot of stress, and maybe you could put together some things that that they like, and take it over just as a surprise. It's not their birthday, but maybe it could be something small. I'm not asking you to spend money on this activity, just something that you're willing to do. Maybe write a glowing letter for a coworker on LinkedIn. Maybe you have a coworker who does a really good job, and they have a LinkedIn page, and you can get on there and give them some accolades. Go for a walk with friends and pick up litter while you're out. My daughter and I went geocaching a couple weeks ago, and the site where the geocache was hidden had a lot of litter. So we did a little Girl Scout collection, picked up some litter while we were geocaching. These are really good exercises in just doing nice things, just being kind. And maybe, I'm not asking it to be anonymous. Maybe you know the person. Maybe they'll know that you're the one who did it for them. That's okay, because you're going to benefit by feeling good about it, and they're going to benefit from what you've done because you're sharing something with them. And it'll probably help the bond that you might have with maybe this elderly person who you really don't know that well, but they just need a ride, or your friend who happens to be under some stress right now, things like that. So little bits of kindness can go a long way for your mood and for the person who's receiving the kindness. Now, little caveat. Sometimes when we show kindness to people, they feel an obligation to reciprocate. And that obligation to reciprocate may be in their head, hovering over them until they can reciprocate. And maybe they can't think of a way or a time or a situation to reciprocate. So don't be surprised if the person ultimately, in the long run, either tries to do something back. That'd be great. That's perfect, because that empowers them and it's good for them, and they get to feel the benefits of giving a kindness. But they might, if they can't figure out a way to reciprocate, might ultimately feel resentful. And so this is a risk you run. They should not feel that way, but a lot of times people do. There's sort of this reciprocity norm that we have as humans, where if a kindness is done to us, we feel the obligation to do a kindness back. One of the things that you can reassure the recipient of your kindness is that they don't have to reciprocate a kindness to you. They can pay it forward. That phrase really helped a lot of people to get over their reciprocity norm. They've received something kind. Now, the only obligation they have is to do something kind. They don't have to give back to you in like and kind. They can just do something kind to someone else. So encourage your recipient of that. If they are saying lots of effusive thank yous, or offering to buy you a coffee or whatever, either accept something small as a thank you and acknowledge that it's fine for them to thank you, because that allows them to feel like they have sort of fulfilled their end of the bargain on reciprocity. But it's also really fair to say, you know what, I just would love it if you could pay it forward. Find somebody else that you can help. And that's how I will feel good about this. So keep that as your sort of locked and loaded, since that's the theme of today, response if your recipient seems to be, feeling a little uncomfortable about the fact that they were a recipient. All right, well, I hope that you'll pursue this, and maybe not this week, but at some point during this quarter, maybe something will present itself as an opportunity, and you'll take advantage of showing some kindness as the quarter goes on. All right, well, I will see you in the next chapter.